Hello and welcome to the Wednesday edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Kimberley Hoeppner and today is June 20th, 2018. Remember, you can always get our information by dialing the 1-800 line here at 1-800-472-0391, or you can simply go to our website at weather.gov/Alaska and feel free to click around on our website. If you have any questions or want to offer your feedback, feel free to contact our TV lead, david.snider@noaa.gov. All right, let's continue on now to the important topics of the day. We do have a couple of flood advisories out there for area rivers that have been affected. Earlier for the Yetna and Squetna rivers across the Susitna Valley, those have already crested and they are on their way down. So this advisory is in effect until 10:45 p.m. And then we have a new advisory out today, and this is for the Chilkat River along the Panhandle locations. And this is due to glacial fed rivers starting to rise, and that's expected to crest on Thursday. So this is running through Friday, 7 a.m. So be aware if you're anywhere in the southeast, as rivers are on the rise due to the warm temperatures yesterday and today. So let's go on to the other danger that we have out there. We do have fire danger just north of the Alaska Range across the interior. Now, they are warming up as well, and warming temperatures and isolated thunderstorms. Well, this is a fire danger, especially in these areas as we head into this time of the year. So be on the lookout. Make sure you put out any fires that you start. Make sure they're dead before you leave them behind. Now, let's take a look at the weather systems across the area, bringing the weather for the southwest mainly. You can see a large swath of clouds and a little bit of spin here near the Alaska Peninsula, just north. The low is centered this afternoon. So if I put this into motion one more time, you can see that weak spin. Otherwise, we have ridging out there to the west, keeping low clouds overspread across all of the Bering. We did have some breaks in the clouds today across the southern areas of the state, mainly south central and there to the southeast. Putting this into motion, we do have a ridge that's sitting down near the Dixon entrance, and this is allowing for some breaks in between that low pressure to the west and the eastern high pressure. So along to the north, they even saw some breaks in the clouds along the central interior up near Fairbanks, creeping up into the 70s, as well into the 70s to lower 80s for the Panhandle locations. Now here is the surface map. Let me just move back over to the side here so you can see the center of low pressure. It's weakening at 1,006 millibars with a few axes for boundaries where precipitation is developing. And the upper level waves around the system is helping to bring the best moisture across Kodiak Island and over the Aleutian and western Alaska ranges during the afternoon hours, with some shower activity starting to develop a little bit further north ahead of the boundary across the Kuskokwim Delta. So up towards the Seward Peninsula, they're starting to break out into some showers this afternoon. Now, behind this low pressure system, mainly patchy fog or low clouds across the western and central areas of the Bering, while across the eastern waters, we're seeing some breaks with patchy fog, mainly across the central Gulf waters. Now, there were some showers just along and north of the Alaska Range, but no thunderstorms have developed yet this afternoon, but we are expecting to see some isolated thunderstorm activity across the central interior and back towards the Kuskokwim Valley area. So be on alert all the way through the Kuskokwim Valley for the evening hours, and those thunderstorms should diminish by the time we head into the low light hours tonight. Can't say after sunset because it doesn't seem like it really sets this time of the year. It stays pretty bright out there. Now let's take a look at the north coast. We do have some patchy fog conditions. Cooler conditions are staying along the coast as ridging from Kamchatka is starting to shift a little bit further to the east, and we're seeing primarily a northerly flow across the Bering Strait there and behind this low pressure. So that's keeping a cooler air mass across the eastern areas of the Bering with some shower activity on the backside of this low pressure system. Now let's advance forward in time. On Thursday, this boundary is going to move a little bit further inland. However, they're going to see some breaks and a little bit drier conditions, allowing for max heating to support the thunderstorm development all the way back through the western coastal locations. So a good swath of moisture is going to be pulled up. As you can see on satellite, there was a good fetch of moisture. So plenty of moisture to feed some showers and thunderstorms across the southern and western areas of the state for Thursday. Now, on the backside of this low pressure, scattered shower activity will be moving around this system, and we'll see patchy fog mainly confined along the western Bering and also across the northern coastal locations. Now, for the southeast, we'll see some clouds spreading back in, especially through the afternoon. That might help to keep temperatures down. In just a few moments, we'll get to those slides on your temperatures. But let's roll forward to your Friday forecast. Now, on Friday, we're expecting less thunderstorm coverage, mainly confined over the central interior. As this boundary begins to lift a little bit further to the north, we will have ridging being the dominant pattern over the eastern Gulf. So we'll expect to see a few afternoon showers primarily across the Panhandle locations. So cloudy for the Panhandle on Thursday, and showers move back in. Possibly Thursday night, some showers will make it into the northern areas of the Panhandle, but Friday you'll see a better chance for showers in your locations. Now, across the south central areas, expect continued showers, mainly on the east-facing slopes, and we do have some stronger southeasterly flow, and that helps with downslope dry conditions on the locations further inland. Now, for the southwest, a little bit less wet for you on Thursday, and then across the eastern Bering, that low is starting to diminish and really losing its organization. So only some light shower activity out across the Bering with some patchy fog behind it along a ridge that extends from the North Pacific. Now let's go over your temperatures. Across the area for tonight, we're expecting temperatures only to drop into the 50s across the central interior, and then across the coastal locations, more like in the mid-40s. And then to the southeast, we're going to see temperatures also in the mid-50s. Now across the northern interior of the state, that's the coldest location, dropping into the upper 20s and into the lower 30s for many locations. And then you'll see that transition as we head towards the Seward Peninsula into the mid-40s for much of the western coastal locations. And then we'll see widespread 40s across the Alaska Peninsula, Bering, and Aleutian Chain. As we head into your Thursday afternoon, very warm temperatures again across the interior, so dry conditions for most of the day will allow those temperatures to max near 80 degrees for especially along Eagle and north towards the Arctic Village. And then across the northern tier of the state, slightly warmer temperatures there expected in the mid-40s, possibly AKwx staying in the upper 30s, but coastal locations will be primarily in the 40s and 50s, with the Panhandle seeing temperatures in the 60s. Very similar temperatures in the 30s again for Friday morning, and temperatures will be in the 40s and 50s across the state. And then temperatures on Friday will be moderating, slightly cooler with another rain system coming through for the weekend.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Let's take a look at your aviation across the state, and we're going to see mostly VFR conditions across the interior areas of the state for your Thursday morning. However, MVFR conditions across the north coast down towards the Brooks Range. Also going to be a concern across much of the southwest and the Gulf location areas, including the Panhandle. So IFR conditions are going to be widespread across the Gulf with MVFR conditions in those southern to middle channels. Now across the Bering, we'll see widespread IFR conditions to the west with patchy conditions along the central and southern waters, MVFR conditions as well. Now during the afternoon, MVFR will be widespread across the southwest mainland and stretching across the Bering, with those IFR conditions becoming more of an issue for the central waters. Looking at the west coastern areas of the state, VFR across the Seward Peninsula, however, we'll see some patchy IFR conditions, and then we'll also see MVFR conditions being a concern across the southwest and much of the Gulf of Alaska. We'll also see IFR conditions extending across the eastern waters of the Gulf into the Prince William Sound, and locations should still watch for that MVFR to IFR condition across the north coast. Now let's take a look at your Friday morning. Looking at conditions very similar to the evening before, with MVFR conditions still across the western interior. and Seward Peninsula, and IFR conditions are going to be widespread across much of the Bering along with MVFR. MVFR is going to be widespread for your Friday morning across the Gulf locations and along the Panhandle. So look for IFR conditions to also be a problem along the Northeast Gulf and Prince William Sound. To the north, we'll still see IFR conditions along the coastal locations with MVFR conditions to the south of the Brooks Range. Now let's take a look at your Friday afternoon. Some improvement there across the interior. However, the coastal locations and north of the Brooks Range are all going to be in the MVFR to IFR categories. We'll see some breaks across the Alaska Peninsula with some MVFR conditions continuing across the west, sneaking into the southwest coast there. And then all along the Bering, IFR conditions are going to be an issue. Now, let's look at your passes in more depth. We will see MVFR improve to VFR for Anaktuvik Pass, but MVFR conditions are going to be possible across that northern entrance. Now, taking a look at Adigan, they're going to be going from MVFR to VFR in the afternoon. And for Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, expect IFR to start, improving to MVFR. For your Rainy Pass, IFR to MVFR late day, and then we'll see windy VFR all day. We'll see Isabel at VFR conditions, and Mentasta will also be at VFR day for you on Thursday. For Tanita will be VFR, and then Portage will be VFR. However, the MVFR conditions are going to be creeping in during the afternoon for that east entrance. Looking at Chilkoot and White Pass, going to start out VFR and then go down to MVFR late day. For your freezing levels to start out the day, we're looking at that just draped at the surface, just along the north slope there, and then the height increases from 4,000 to 8,000 feet as you head towards the interior. A little bit more height rises towards the Panhandle, up to 12,000 feet. Across the southwest, they start dropping back down to 6,000 to 4,000 in the eastern Bering waters, and then continuing to rise again out towards the western areas of the Bering, up to 8,000. Let's take a look at your icing. The concerns tomorrow are going to be along that north coast above 4,000 feet and along the eastern areas of the Bering at 6,000 feet and greater. Now for your jet stream on Thursday, it's going to be quite amplified with this low pressure centering near the southwestern areas of the state, and then ridging is going to be kind of in a blocking pattern just to the east. Now at the 9,000 foot level, here's that low center with southeasterly flow ahead of it and more of a north to westerly flow on the backside of it. Zonal flow across the southern Bering waters and a southerly fetch well ahead of this low pressure system. The strongest winds just along that eastern sector of the low pressure system. At 3,000 feet, we will see the same pattern. We see that southerly fetch with the strongest winds just ahead of the low pressure system, and then the northerly flow on the backside, strongest winds just along the base here out of the west. And for the Panhandle location, lighter winds, 10 knots. Now let's take and sum up all of the issues for your low pressure that it's bringing for you tomorrow. We'll see below 5,000 feet for turbulence and possible moderate conditions there across the Seward Peninsula. And don't forget about the thunderstorms across the interior.
Leatherbacks are the largest turtles on Earth, growing up to 7 feet long and weighing more than 2,000 pounds. These sea turtles are among the most highly migratory animals on Earth, some traveling up to 10,000 miles a year between their nesting and feeding grounds. Prevalent in every ocean except the Arctic and Antarctic, the species overall is declining, more so in the Pacific. In the eastern Pacific, the Mexican population was once thought to be the largest in the world and has experienced an alarming decline.
This trajectory of decline that we've seen and actually collapse. We're talking about only 20 or 30 turtles nesting every year, where thousands used to just 40 years ago. That's the kind of dramatic decline.
The western Pacific population has been declining steadily, and it's particularly critical to act now before it collapses, while there are enough turtles and nests to respond to conservation measures. But threats to all leatherbacks in the Pacific need to be addressed.
The top threats to populations are uncontrolled coastal development, all the bad stuff on the nesting beaches, egg harvest, poaching of the females, predation on the eggs by dogs and pigs. Deforestation makes the sand too warm and dry and the eggs don't hatch. Another one is incidental capture in fishing gear. During their vast migrations, they get caught in fishing gear throughout the Pacific. And finally, marine debris, which the leatherbacks mistake for their favorite food, jellyfish, and they choke on those.
Protecting leatherbacks in U.S. waters alone is not enough to ensure the continued existence of the species. The highly migratory nature of Pacific leatherbacks requires cooperation and international collaboration. NOAA is focusing on partnerships with Mexico, Central America, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, and the Solomon Islands in the Pacific.
Our action plan promotes a holistic recovery strategy that addresses all the sources of mortality. So that's basically ensuring that the remaining nesting sites are protected and the nests produce as many hatchlings as possible. And then secondly, in tandem with that, is reducing the fisheries-related mortalities. We're working with international partners to incentivize community participation on the nesting beach conservation and developing alternative livelihood programs that wean communities off leatherback resources and introduce alternative methods for food and income. Recovery is going to take a long time, on the order of 20 to 30 years at least, before we see some of these actions bear fruit. But here in the US, we can all help leatherbacks by making seafood choices, for instance, that support sustainable fishing practices. And beachgoers can certainly do their part by keeping our oceans clean of plastic debris, picking up marine litter, particularly plastic bags.
Together with our partners, we are strengthening protection and conservation efforts to ensure a future for leatherbacks, helping them to survive and once again thrive in the waters of the Pacific Ocean.
For over 40 years, NOAA scientists have been collecting data and piecing together the story of the gray whale. Each year, new discoveries are made, revealing the secrets of this ancient traveler. With the northeastern Pacific population recovered, leading scientists from the NOAA Southwest Fisheries Science Center continue their research efforts to help save the western population from extinction. The most effective way to identify individuals and count the population is to photograph them from the surface. Using the gray whale's distinctive markings and gray spots caused by parasites on their skin, scientists document these characteristics to identify individuals.
So we're able to track migratory pathways and corridors by the simple use of photo identification. There are other ways to do that as well, biopsy sampling and genetics.
And from the air.
Aerial photography is one way you can study animals based on their size and shape. So you can learn a lot about nutritive and reproductive condition of whales just by measuring their size and shape from vertical aerial photographs.
You can also put satellite transmitters on them and track them remotely. You put the transmitter on and let them go, and you watch them move across the Pacific or down to China or wherever it might be.
To further learn and discover where these great sojourners swim, the team of researchers traveled to Russia and set up camp on Sakhalin Island.
The main focus of our research while we were on Sakhalin was to collect photo identification. If it was a whale that we had not collected a genetic sample from previously, we would also attempt to collect a sample from the whales.
Whereas whales are endowed with natural insulation, their human observers must gear up to brave the cold in order to study these marine giants up close.
we're typically only able to work about 1/3 of the time that we're there. And that's mostly due to this fog that just invades the area and sits sometimes for weeks on end. So it can be very challenging to try and do field work in this site.
Recently, 2 whales from the western population surprised scientists by migrating across the Pacific to the waters of California and Mexico.
It's a really fun finding. It's added another piece to the puzzle that we didn't previously know about. And I would have to say that it's opened up more questions than we had before.
Research scientists from Japan, Russia, and the United States share images of animals they've spotted.
We take a photograph of an individual off of Sakhalin Island, and we get a phone call from Japanese scientists, and they say, hey, guess what? We've got a picture of a gray whale in Japan. We say, can you send it to us? We'd love to try and match it. They'll send us the picture, we'll compare it to our catalog, and we'll say, hey, we've got a match from Sakhalin to Japan.
Unlike many species of whales that still remain on the endangered species list, the eastern Pacific gray whale, once on the brink of extinction, now numbers about 20,000 individuals. Recovery efforts that started 40 years ago and the ongoing research and monitoring by NOAA scientists have contributed to the conservation of the gray whales. Together, with legal protection and public education, scientists are playing their part to ensure the survival of this magnificent migratory animal.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Now on to the last segment of our show. We're going to start with the marine forecast. Now let's take a look over at the northwest coast. Mainly open water here across the Chukchi Sea, but we're going to see some ice being pushed by the wind in a southward direction. So northerly flow there causing some ice chunks just to flow south. Now let's take a look at your southeast forecast for your Thursday. Let me just step aside here and you'll see that we'll have generally a southwesterly flow across the area, a little bit stronger winds, a small craft up towards the Lynn Canal there, and seas across the inner channels will be between 3 to 5 feet. The outer waters will be between 4 to 5 feet. Now let's take a look at Friday's forecast. A little change of wind direction there, more of a northerly flow except across the northern Lynn Canal there. We'll see those gusty southerly small craft winds continue on Friday. And then we'll see mainly a west to northwest flow for elsewhere below 20 knots. Or 20 knots and below, and then seas on this day 3 to 4 feet across the inner channels and 5 feet across the outer waters. Now let's take a look at the north and western Gulf waters. We'll see primarily a southerly flow, more of an easterly flow across Prince William Sound, and for the Cook Inlet, looking for a southerly flow 10 to 15 knots across the area. Isn't too bad for wind speeds. And then we'll see seas on this day across the Gulf 5 feet, and also between 2 to 5 feet across the Prince William Sound, Cook Inlet locations. For your Friday, expect primarily a southerly flow direction across the area, all underneath 20 knots for the area. Once again, seas on this day will be between 2 to 5 feet. The lower seas, of course, in the Prince William Sound and across the Cook Inlet. Now let's take a look at the Alaska Peninsula. On this day, Thursday, we'll see a southwesterly flow in this location, 20 knots or below, with seas between 2 to 4 feet across the Bering side. Pacific side will have 4 to 5 feet. On your Friday, we'll see a southwesterly flow day, 10 to 15 knots across the area waters, and we'll see 2 to 3 foot seas across the Bering with 3 to 5 foot seas across the Pacific side. Now on your Thursday for the Bering, we'll see light wind speeds again between 10 to 15 knots across the area, step a little bit stronger out towards Unalaska with 20 knot flow out in that direction. Seas overall will be between 4 to 6 feet. And on Friday, expect a wind direction change, a little bit more southwesterly to westerly direction across the waters, and we'll see seas between 4 to 5 feet. Let's take a look at the west coast now. There's that northerly flow that I mentioned just a moment ago, 20 to 30 knots overall across the area, a little bit more of a southwesterly flow south of Nunivak Island, and seas on this day will be between 3 to 5 feet. On Friday, expect a wind direction change, becoming more southerly, although we will see that northerly flow out towards St. Matthew Island, and we'll see seas on this day between 3 to 8 feet, a little bit higher seas on this day. And then we'll see across the north and west coast the strongest winds along the Chukchi Sea and south towards the Bering Strait. And Kotzebue, we'll see those winds, small craft 25 to 30 knots out of the north, more of an easterly flow along the north coast at 10 to 15 knots. Now we'll see winds a little bit less strong on Friday, becoming more southerly towards the Seward Peninsula and then switching direction again out of the southeast. Now let's recap your forecast for tonight. As we head through the evening, we have a good fetch of moisture with the low pressure center just centered over the eastern areas of the Bering and pushing inland across the southwest, bringing ongoing light shower activity. We will see the flood advisory for the Dehne and Skwetna rivers expire later this evening at 10:45 p.m., but be aware that the Chilkat River in the Panhandle will be under an advisory through early Friday morning, as the river is expected to peak during the day on Thursday. Expect light shower activity to develop across the state for the evening hours with isolated thunderstorms, and along the north, mainly just fog, as well as the western areas of the Bering. And another dry day for the southeast is expected tomorrow. However, there will be an increase of cloud cover through the day. Now for the interior locations, isolated thunderstorms will be in the afternoon and evening hours with light rain ongoing across the southeast and a few scattered showers across the southern areas of the state. Drier across the north with patchy fog again along the coastal locations and across the western areas of the Bering. To sum this all up, shower activity will be diminishing for the most part for the southwest as we head into the end of the week, with isolated thunderstorm activity for the southwest, for the interior expected.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.